Welcome back. Today I'm going to be bringing you my running back rankings for the 2026 NFL Draft. If you do enjoy the content, please consider liking and subscribing. It would be very much appreciated. Now let's jump into it. At 7, I've got Nicholas Singleton out of Penn State, and I've got a UDFA evaluation on it. Within 5 minutes of watching Nick Singleton, I felt pretty confident he was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school. And that may sound like a compliment, but actually it's because it's the only way a prospect this flawed could have gained enough traction to be considered a consensus Day 2 pick. Last season, he played a secondary role to his teammate Katron Allen, but has plenty of tread on the tyres after being involved in the rotation for the last 4 seasons with Penn State. Singleton was a track star in high school, and whilst the speed doesn't flash in that same way on the field, his straight line speed is good for a 6 foot, 219 pound build, but he just felt flat. I didn't see anything between the tackles that makes me think he could succeed in an NFL rotation. The elusiveness and fluidity is very underwhelming, and for a man with his build, I thought the contact balance was poor. Not to mention the fact he faced niggling injuries in 2024 and is now coming off a broken foot which he suffered at the Senior Bowl. He's a good blocker, so maybe that helps him stick around as a 4th or 5th stringer and have the odd bit of success with his speed in a gap-heavy scheme. At 6, I've got Singleton's teammate Katron Allen, and I've got a Day 3 evaluation on him. The Katron Allen evaluation isn't a complicated one. He lacks the speed and fluidity to be anything more than a short yardage back. As a short yardage back though, Allen has a powerful, thick build, allowing him to often break the first tackle, and he's actually got a bit of shiftiness to him, allowing him to occasionally get out of situations where the defense is all over him before he can even begin the run design, which will come handy in the role I think he will be playing. At 5, I've got Jadarian Price out of Notre Dame. Jadarian Price served as the secondary option to Jeremiah Love in the Notre Dame offense, and having achieved a rate of 6 yards per carry, it seems the consensus has overcompensated, because on paper he appears as a clear example of a hidden gem who shouldn't be slept on just because he wasn't the primary back on his team. Although his 4.49 40-yard dash isn't spectacular by today's standards, he certainly got enough juice once he hits his stride, and he achieved the 6 yards per carry with a catalogue of breakaway runs behind excellent blocking. But I think he lacks balance. And I don't mean contact balance because he's got a powerful base that is hard to bring down, but when you watch a good running back, there's this feeling like they're floating. It's not the exaggerated movements that make a difference, it's the ability to fit the space with a constant variance of speed and lots of subtle shifts and shakes. The feeling I get with Price is that it's one speed and it's one direction. He rarely takes the opportunity to break away from the natural progression of the run design because I don't think he's capable of switching gears like that. I have my suspicions that he's never been the same since he ruptured his left Achilles tendon in his freshman season of 2022. This injury is a killer for running backs as it attacks the ability to push off. Here's a few examples of running backs in recent history whose careers were either ended or never the same due to an Achilles tear. Marlon Mack, James Robinson, Mikel LaShaw, Arian Foster, Lendale White, Kendall Hunter, Dante Foreman, Cam Akers, Vic Ballard, and Tariq Cohen. Here are some examples of running backs who came back and seemingly fully recovered from an Achilles tear: J.K. Dobbins and Justice Hill. That's the list. Jadarian Price didn't just tear his Achilles, he ruptured it, which is another word for a really severe tear. I may be way off, and this injury was 4 years ago, but I feel pretty confident that this lines up with the lack of ability to naturally and easily shift or vary his speed that I saw on the field. At 4, I've got Jonah Coleman out of Washington, and I've got a Day 2 evaluation on him. Jonah Coleman has a decent amount of tread on the tyres after playing a pretty significant role for the entirety of his 4-year college career in which he split between Arizona and Washington. There is a touch of concern as despite being durable for most of his career, he reportedly played through a PCL sprain and a minor ankle injury towards the end of the season. At 5'8", 220 pounds, I would argue Coleman moves well for his size, but obviously athleticism isn't going to be his game and he knows it, consistently turning down opportunities to break away and do anything outside the tackles. But if you stick him in a zone-heavy scheme with a decent offensive line, Coleman's going to be productive. His bowling ball build contradicts the smoothness in which he glides through the middle, finding every nook and cranny there is to be found and adding a few yards on top with outstanding contact balance. It's hard to imagine him being much more than a rotational player in a committee backfield, but if he stays healthy, I think he's going to be a fantastic option to have in that role. At 3, I've got Mike Washington Jr. out of Arkansas, and I've got a second round evaluation on him. Mike Washington was a standout at the Combine, as despite a 6'1", 223-pound frame, he ran a blazing 4.33 40-yard dash, and this shows up on the field. Only Jeremiah Love had a higher breakaway run percentage in this video. When the run design works and the crease is there, Washington is a killer, exploding through the hole with defenders dropping off his powerful base on the way. The problem is that when things don't line up perfectly, he looks a lot less dynamic. He actually reminds me of Derrick Henry in that when it works, it's amazing, but he's got this awkward sort of shuffly movement when there isn't a clear hole to take advantage of. Washington's vision and feel for space is also inconsistent. There are times when the opportunity is gaping for him to change direction and hit the crease that has opened up for him elsewhere, and he doesn't take it. But then he will bounce to the outside when it's not there for him and lose yards. On top of this, he's only 22 and has been durable, but there's plenty of tread on the tyres as he's been a starter for 4 years of his 5-year college career, in which he has spent with Buffalo, New Mexico State, and for his final season, Arkansas. He also had 3 fumbles last season, which you can chalk up as coincidence, as fumbles are hard to predict. But 3 fumbles has been the mode average in his college career as a whole, which is a bit on the high side. He's a very unnatural route runner and an unreliable blocker despite his build, so there's just a lot to feel uneasy about. But if you're a team that has a really good offensive line and run a gap-heavy scheme, Washington could be a serious weapon. At 2, I've got the hidden gem of this running back class, Emmett Johnson out of Nebraska, and I've got a first round evaluation on him. Emmett Johnson was in the rotation for 2 years with Nebraska before his third and final season, where he took on an enormous 251 carries, by far the most of anyone in this group. Whilst you could frame this as concerning if he was picking up niggling injuries during this time, the squeaky clean injury history despite this heavy workload is a testament to his durability. As for the reason you probably haven't heard Johnson's name even close to where I'm suggesting he should be drafted, we can clear that up very easily. He's 5'10", 202 pounds and ran a 4.56 40-yard dash. And what's the story for almost every running back I can think of in recent history who fell to the mid-rounds and went on to have excellent careers? They didn't test very well. Whether it's Alvin Kamara, Kyron Williams, Aaron Jones, they're small and didn't run a fast 40 time. But how often are running backs running at full speed anyway? Speed is great as the cherry on top if you've got it, but the most important thing is what you're doing between the tackles. Emmett Johnson is incredibly elusive. I mean, seriously. His feel for space and ability to stick his foot in the ground and shift at a moment's notice, unbelievable. And he knows how to set defenders up as well. So whilst he's got exceptional balance, fluidity and vision to where he can get skinny between the tackles and make the most of a good offensive line, part of what appeals to me about Johnson is that he actually doesn't need an amazing offensive line. Of course, it would be helpful if he did, but I think he would be most valuable for a team that run a zone-heavy scheme, but the offensive line isn't where it needs to be right now. Because for his lack of physical traits, Johnson doesn't lack wow plays by any means. He is someone who is going to make things happen out of nothing, as shown by his 68 missed tackles forced last season, the most of anyone in this group. It may take some time for him to get his opportunity, but if he stays healthy, I think we're looking at a future star. At 1 is Jeremiah Love out of Notre Dame. As you may have heard by now, Jeremiah Love is special. If he lands in the right destination and stays healthy, I think he's going to be on the heels of Bijan Robinson as the most impactful running back in the NFL. His 4.36 speed shows up on film, as when the hole is there, he is assertive and explodes into the space. In many ways, he reminds me of Kenneth Walker, with his blend of explosiveness, contact balance, and the creativity to recognize opportunities to break away from the natural design, switch gears, and hit the outside for huge gains. Defenders consistently drop off him as he effortlessly floats through the offensive line, leaving a trail of bodies in his path. And he's got that same feeling as when you watch Bijan Robinson or Saquon Barkley, where as soon as it looks like there's no chance he can go any further, they just make it happen. A hurdle, a spin, whatever it takes. But I think what excites me most about him is that he combines all his physical traits with phenomenal vision. His fluidity, paired with the balance between patience and assertiveness, reminds me a lot of the leading rusher last season, James Cook. I don't think he's an amazing route runner, although bear in mind when I say that, I'm comparing him to the best of the best. Love is a smooth route runner, it's not a genuine concern. I just don't think he's Christian McCaffrey, Bijan Robinson, to where you watch them run routes and it feels like they could be a starting slot receiver if they wanted to be. In terms of how early you draft him, my personal philosophy in the past has been that the situation has to be right. The worst teams have the earliest picks and a running back can't fix that on his own. That is still my absolute belief, but the NFL moves so quickly now. For example, the Bears built their offensive line in an off-season last year. They already had Darnell Wright, but Drew Dorman, Jonah Jackson, Joe Thuney, and Ozzie Trapilo, they were all new additions. My point is that say it's the Titans at 4. I don't think they're ready, and I don't know that they will be. And forget this off-season because I'm not convinced they've done enough. But if I was the GM, you could draft Love this year. He may have an underwhelming season, but the Titans have the cap space to where next off-season they could make 4 or 5 key additions to the offensive line and to the receiver room, and suddenly you've got the perfect situation for an elite young running back. As a team with the resources to improve, you have to plan for success, and drafting Jeremiah Love is doing that. So, I didn't get through enough prospects in this class generally this year to give a ton of analysis on the depth, but I think I'm higher on this running back class than most. I feel the high end of Jeremiah Love is better than Ashton Jeanty last year, and I'm convinced that people are missing the gem of this class, Emmett Johnson. Then you've got Mike Washington, who needs the right situation but could be a special player in the right situation, and I love Jonah Coleman as well. But that's all from me. I'll be bringing you quarterback analysis next, so stay tuned for that. If you did enjoy the content, please consider liking and subscribing. It would be very much appreciated, and I'll see you next time.